Welcome to Career Insights with Ambition, the podcast where we delve into leaders' moments of truth that shape their careers and the businesses they work in. I'm your host, Chris Crolla, and each month we sit down with leaders to uncover the untold stories of their journey to success. Don't miss the next episode. Follow or subscribe wherever you listen. Hi everyone, and welcome to Career Insights with Ambition. I'm Chris Crolla, and I'm here with Herb Toole. Herb is the CFO of Atura, 240 million turnover business, and Herb has actually worked for some of the larger businesses here in Australia, Optus and Telstra, in the past. Maybe a bit of a tech nut, we will find out, but Herb also does some really cool stuff in his spare time as well. A keen foodie. I know you're a big Anthony Bourdain fan. We've spoken about that quite a bit in the past, but also have time for a bit of Call of Duty and to enjoy some MMA.
Actually, Fortnite, Chris.
Is it Fortnite? Did you change? Or
No, did both, but preference was for Fortnite.
you did a bit of both. Fair enough, mate. I thought that Fortnite was for the kids, though, no?
Yeah, it is a little. I'm very emotionally immature that way.
How do you have time for it all?
I don't. It's been years, but there was a period where I was knee deep into it.
So look, thanks for joining us. I'm keen to get to know a bit more about yourself and any words of wisdom you obviously have for the future generation as well. What was it that appealed to you about accounting? What got you into accounting in the first place?
Oh, look, it was a couple of factors. I think the first of them was obviously you could tell from my accent I'm not a native Australian, nor are you. But I've been in Australia for quite a while, close to 30 years now. I came around a 2-year work transfer in the mid-90s.
You know, a long and distinguished career. I wasn't going to mention the numbers, but hey, you did.
Yeah, don't let the looks fool you. I'm a bit older than people think.
So what was it though? What was it that inspired you to become an accountant?
So growing up in Canada, which is where this accent's from, when it came time to pick uni, I always was very business and commercially inclined. Had to pick a degree that would focus on business side of things, and general business admin degrees, BCom. I wasn't quite sure what that direction was. General, that's not saying that that's not a good thing. I didn't do any accounting in high school. I didn't, so I got a degree in accounting and finance from the University of Waterloo, just outside Toronto. So two things, it was like, yes, it's a little bit more focused. Finance side of things will naturally leverage out to a whole bunch of other stuff, but also the university had a very good, what they call a cooperative program, which helps during your summers and during 12-month, what they call work terms, you actually intern with one of the back then the big 6 accounting firms. I wanted to get away from home, so the stayed on campus. University was a couple hours outside Toronto, and so all those factors just played a role into it. And I thought, when I'm done, do I get my CA? I actually entertained the idea of going to law school after that. Nothing came of it, but so that's where it transitioned, and that's where it kind of kicked off. As I'll become a CA, CPA, all that stuff, then focus on a finance, business, commercial, that sort of thing, leveraged from that.
Yeah, fair enough. And because you started with Arthur Andersen, did they transfer you out here?
Yeah, they did actually. Yeah, so there's nothing better than traveling on company time. So after I did my CA, at that point I had done 2 years as what they call a co-op student, or in some places like more than an intern, maybe like a cadet in some places. Did 2 years there pre-graduation, then did 2 full years while I finished my CA. And at the end of that 2-year term, when I was a fully qualified CA, there was an opportunity to transfer from Toronto to either Sydney, Hong Kong, or Singapore. So this is in the mid-90s, and I said, hey, excellent.
Worst places to be than Sydney, mate.
Absolutely, 100%. Full part of the world.
What is it, in your career to date, from beginning to end, what is it you're most proud of?
Oh, look, it's been a long career. This pride takes different forms depending on what your perspective is. I did 2 years with Arthur Andersen here in Sydney. At the end of that, they sponsored me for my PR. 2 years after that, back then it was like you do 2 years, you pretty much automatically qualify for an Australian citizenship. I want to be here for the Sydney Olympics. That was one of the things that I wanted to do. I basically took a leap of faith. This was in the late 90s when there was the first tech boom, for those of us who can remember it. I joined a venture capital fund for 2 years, then joined a startup, one of our portfolio companies, for 2 years. And those that remember this as well, there was also what we call a tech wreck back in the days, in the early 2000s, where the industry kind of cratered out.
The bubble burst, was it?
The bubble burst, the first tech bubble burst, back in the days of Yahoo and pre Google and pre Facebook and all that stuff. And then that's when I went back into the corporate space. And from that point onwards, it's just been corporate roles for the last 20 plus years. So back to your original question about, there's lots of things that I have great pride in from a career perspective, such as, I took the punt when I was able to give it a go and see what it was like in the venture, or nowadays is more private equity. So I take a punt with a startup, work through it, see what it was like, hustle really hard to get things across, and see that perspective that is kind of percolating now. Yeah. But I see it with a different lens because I'm not in that space anymore. But I go, I remember back in those days. Did a lot of, in the last 20 plus years with corporates, both big and small, some great projects that I did, some great people that I worked with, set up some good systems, assisted on pricing and commercial terms for some really big deals, approval for some large capital spends, especially during my time in telco. It's a smattering. It's not, look, at the end of the day, it's accounting, right? So there's not those emotional highs and lows of, let's say, sales or delivery or that sort of thing, or product development. So it's just moderate successes by a lot of other people's comparisons, but it's sometimes you just kind of go, oh, no, that was, looking back in hindsight, you go, oh, that was good.
Yeah, good. It's kind of like your future self will thank you for the hard work you put in today.
100%.
You obviously look back at the years you were putting in the hard yards where you learned lots and with fondness as well. So
yeah, look, accounting is one of those things, and I'm one of those people where I'm reasonably intelligent, but I'm not a savant. I'm not the Sheldon Cooper that just picks everything up and does. There's a lot of grinding involved, right? To understand, to be across everything, as both breadth and depth across your portfolio of obligations. The grind is, some people don't necessarily, and for the younger generation, it's like there is some heavy lifting. There is a lot of opportunities where you can just do your job well, and there's no highs and lows. There's no soaking up of your bandwidth at certain times, and then, a big commitment. But for me, I found that, number one, those jobs were not what I was looking for, steady as she goes for the whole time. And secondly, if you want to get to that pinnacle of, in the finance field specifically, not necessarily someone who owns a P&L, like you're the CEO or the MD of a business, but in the finance field, your portfolio gets broader. All the requirements, they're not necessarily paying you to do things anymore, right? You would have done them at some point during your career. They're paying you to make decisions, influence people, manage the team, but leverage off the practical and functional experience that you've had leading up to that point. And they don't pay me to do things necessarily. Sometimes I have to do them, but it's really to help get to that outcome using the resources that I've got.
It's an important point as well, because those partnering skills you would have learned along the way as well, which is now obviously a huge part of your role, right?
Yeah.
What was that moment of truth in your career? What was it that accelerated you?
I wouldn't call it acceleration. It's been 20 years in the making since I came back into the corporate space, so there was no landmark event. I've always been, either internally within the place where I was at, or I saw an opportunity elsewhere, slowly progressing up, divisional finance roles, finance and commercial, to within a group, to divisional within the country. There was a period of time I had some personal challenges where I actually took time off work and effectively resigned and retired. My wife got very sick and she eventually passed away, and I said, I'm done, I'm okay with this. And then I went back to work, as the CFO for an ASX microcap a couple of years ago, and leveraging off the relationships that you've built. My previous boss from about 15 years before that, we were not best friends, but we worked together for 5 years. We did a lot of good stuff together. He reached out to me, and he was at my wife's funeral, so we kept in touch. We saw each other at alumni events. I said, "What are you going to do now?" I said, "Look, I may go back to work. I don't know." And this was around the time of COVID, so it made things even more challenging. I said, "I think I'm going to pack it in. Give me a little bit of time to grieve and that sort of thing." And during COVID, that's when all the Fortnite came in. When you're in lockdown and you can't do a whole lot. My wife was gone. My kids are grown out of the house. They're on their own. So it's like, you get pretty bored when you're working. And so after I rejoined the workforce, this former boss found out, and he said, "Are you back on the market? I've got a company now that I've started. I'm going to IPO, or I just have. I'm looking for a CFO. Do you want to throw your hat in the ring?" So it wasn't an appointment. I had to go through the process with everyone else. But I said, "You know what? I would love to." So even though that was not my first CFO gig, that's where I am now. And it's been probably my most challenging yet enjoyable and stressful and exciting. This will be a great denouement for my career when it's all said and done.
I think exciting and challenging. Always, that's the way, mate. Like, life's worth living, right? So.
Yeah, look, and exhausting. I don't want anyone to think this is an easy gig.
No, not at all, mate. Not at all. Well, following on from that, like, what words of wisdom would you have for the next generation, people that are looking to become CFOs in the future?
Look, there's two things, and I don't want to sound like the cranky old guy that comes across. Within each business, because especially with the people that come up through public accounting, right, where the mindset, and the same with law firms, investment banks, that sort of thing, where it's up or out, right? Every step of the way, you have a path. If you get staff person, senior manager, director, partner, and at any step of the way, you can't spend the rest of your career at a step before you get to partner. And if you're going, if I'm stuck here 5, 6, 7, 8 years, it's probably time to move on. Within the corporate space, there isn't the same career plan, right? When I hire somebody for a particular role, it's like I'm hiring for that role. And if I can get 3 years out of them, that's a success. Yeah. If I can keep them longer, that's a bonus. Now, the thing is, the opportunities for that individual who's in that role, everyone's wired differently. Do they want to move on? Would they be happy doing this job for the next 10, 15 years? Depends, right? The expectations are not set, but when we hire them to do that role, the opportunities that exist within the business for them to grow sideways or up will be very circumstantial, right? It'll be when this person moves, if you want that role, if and when he or she moves, we can prepare for it. But we can't say there's a time frame when that's going to take place. But that's the type of opportunity you want. We'll keep an eye out for that. If the business grows that way, that can justify a requirement for more capacity in that type of role and in that type of job. And if you're the right person, let's work towards that. But there's no entitlement or there's no expectation that that'll happen. It is very circumstantial.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think that's the bit that I always took on, where I kind of processed that, and when I had to find my own opportunity, whether it was internal or external. Whereas, I'm seeing a little bit now where I get both personally and amongst my peers and colleagues in other businesses, where you get a lot of, well, what's my next step? You're not catering to my career growth. But the thing is, we want to, right? Especially for the good people. Good people are rarer than hen's teeth, right? So we want to keep everybody like that. We need positive affirmation. We need to understand. We haven't made any assumptions as to what you want to do. We haven't made any career plans for what you want to do. You've been hired for this role, You do this well. Do you want to keep on doing it? Because by that same token, we can't say this person does this role well. We think we can advance them to do this other role. That individual may give you feedback. I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and we never set that expectations when they came on board, right? So it's in a roundabout way. What I'm trying to say is, in the commercial space, not so much in the structured, like I said, the public accounting, law firms, investment banks, for your own career development, for your own aspirations and ambitions, you need to take a lot of your own ownership to that. Get an advocate as well. Your manager is the best person who goes, oh, I would barrack for this person because they are good. They are special. We want to keep them in the organization, even if they're not doing the same job that I hired them for. They bring value to the group. That's probably in terms of focus on career development and opportunity, that sort of stuff. From your own personal perspective, there needs to be some. The path is not laid out for you.
Yeah, I love that. I love that advice of ownership. I always feel as well like there's. I feel that patience and loyalty are qualities that are very underestimated.
Yeah.
In today's world. But as you say, taking that ownership of that and knowing or having making sure that you're doing everything you can to accelerate your own career.
Yeah.
It's fantastic advice. So it's great advice to end on, mate. Thank you so much for taking the time out to join us this afternoon. I've really loved chatting to you like I do every time, mate. It's been really insightful. So bye everyone. Until we meet again, that's been Career Insights with Ambition. Bye.
Thank you. Cheers.
That concludes another insightful episode of Career Insights with Ambition. If you've been inspired by today's conversation, share it with a friend or leave us a review and subscribe to the podcast. Until next time, keep leading with ambition and turning your moments of truth into milestones for success. All right, cool. Career Insights with Ambition, brought to you by Ambition, a specialist recruitment agency committed to building better futures for organisations we work for and the professionals we help. Subject matter experts in accounting and finance, banking and financial services, technology and transformation, we're here to help. Find out more at ambition.com.au.